Now, but we're 1 hour in, so we've got 23 hours, or I suppose if we're looking really at the time, it's 22 hours and 57 minutes left of the live stream for today. And well, I guess it's time that we start looking at, well, we'll bring on our next presenter. Wrong button. That's the button I wanted. I'm doing all the back of house stuff and front of house stuff myself today. So it's just balancing and hitting the right buttons. That's all the fun part of it. But anyway, let me go grab the next speaker. Hi folks, I'm back again. That's right. The next speaker is, well, it's me. So if you thought you were going to be getting away from me for at least the next half an hour, that's a little bit unfortunate, because yes, I am going to be sticking around, and it is time for me to jump on for my session. And this is going to be a really fun juggling act, because I am producing the live stream at the same time as presenting on the live stream, and also moderating the chat to see if there's any questions that come in. So do feel free to ask questions on the chat if you're watching live on our channels, because me and the other hosts will be keeping an eye across those questions that are coming in and forwarding them on to the presenters in the Q&A as we hit that. But anyway, let's crack on with my session, which is the one that I've most been looking forward to, and I hope that you have too as well. Today, I'm going to be talking about generative AI for the .NET developer. If you've only just tuned in for today's session, my name is Aaron Powell. I'm a principal cloud advocate in the .NET on Azure advocacy team here at Microsoft. And the folks that I've had over the last 6 months, well, I mean, I suppose this seems to have been like what everyone's focusing on is AI. So I want to talk a bit about that and what it means as a .NET developer to be doing AI. But rather than just jump into a bunch of slides, I'm going to jump in with a demo. So let's come over here to VS Code, and I've got a couple of demo applications that we'll actually have a look at how they're made later on, but we're going to start off by just running it. So let's go .NET run. So we'll fire off this application. It's going to start up in a minute. Let's collapse off the sidebar to there, make everything nice and big, maximize the screen real estate that we've got. There we go. I think that's readable enough. Okay, cool. So this is kind of a ChatGPT-like experience, but running as a .NET console application. So let's say, what is the history of .NET? Send it across a question or a prompt, and then this is going to then come back with an answer for us. So this chat experience that we've built here, it's got an Australian personality. That's why it's kicking off with "G'day, mate." Got to bring some more Aussie to the live stream for today. And then yeah, we can see it's hitting kind of the keynote. I'm not going to read what it's saying on screen because, well, that's a lot of text and it's not very interesting to watch me read. You can read just as well as I can. But yeah, it's hitting the key points of .NET Framework, came out in 2002 alongside Visual Studio.NET. It's talking about some of the other milestones in there around .NET Core, the releasing of that being cross-platform, being open sourced, and then the unification that happened with .NET 5, where .NET Framework and .NET Core merged together into the single .NET platform that we have today. But you also notice that this is a little bit old. It's not knowing anything kind of beyond .NET 5, or it's referring to .NET 5 as looking at that future. So this is because we're using a model that's not kind of up to date. It doesn't know about .NET 6, .NET 7, and well, definitely doesn't know about .NET 8, given that was only released yesterday. So let's wrap this up from a demo standpoint, and we are now going to jump back into our slides and talk a bit about AI and then kind of how this sort of an application gets built. But naturally, whenever someone asks about like AI, it's like, is it going to take our job? Like, did AI actually write the slide deck that I'm going to be presenting today? And that is something that you'll have to try and figure out yourself by sticking around for this presentation. Is how much is this a talk that I wrote, and how much was a talk written by me just waiting for some form of generative AI to give me back a prompt? But before we can really dive into the nuances of what generative AI is and that kind of stuff, I just want to talk about some of the like fundamentals of it, and it's like where everything when it comes with AI starts with a model. this is really the initial things that we have when we're working with an AI. And I'm not an AI researcher. I'm not someone that is from a data science background. I'm a developer. I'm a consumer of REST endpoints is the way that I describe my usage of AI. And when it comes to the way I think about it, I think about the model as kind of, it's a database, or to humanize it, it's the brain that we have. And that is basically, it's something that we're feeding data into. And the more data we feed into it, the more quote unquote intelligent it can become. And the resulting of working with that model can give us better answers. This could be textual data, it could be image data, whatever the case may be. And that's what we use to build up our model, our starting point when it comes to working with our AI platform that we're building on top of it. So let's talk about a couple of different forms of AI that we can work with, or that we have worked with, because AI is not new. Like we've had AI around for decades. It's become a whole lot more prevalent in particularly the last 12 months. Most people actually work with AI on a daily basis, or engage with forms of AI on a daily basis, whether they're kind of cognizant of that or not. And the most common way that people work with that is through voice assistants. Whether this is like an Apple Siri in your watch or your phone, Google Assistant in the Android devices. I have Google Homes all around my house. I'm going to hope that I don't accidentally trigger one during this talk, and we'll hear it from like a room across presenting. Or if anyone's listening, I won't say the trigger words for Amazon's device, because it's nothing more fun than having those trigger often in people's houses while you're presenting live. But these are obviously forms of AI, but they tend to use a variety of different components that make up the AI landscape to give you something to work with. Things like natural language processing, or NLP, where we are taking the spoken words and turning that into text that can then be consumed by our model. Because models, they don't have ears. They're not going to hear what we say. So we have to turn it into something that is then getting represented by consumed by our model underneath. So natural language processing it understands the text. It can break that down into the words that were actually spoken within it, and do things like understand sentiment in that. So where is the emphasis placed on it, so that you can do things with the intent that people are stating in spoken language. We know the difference in using spoken language as a way to communicate with someone versus just purely text, and how that can be differently interpreted. Another form of image generation, AI, is image classification. So in this case, we would have a model that's maybe been specialized around understanding what an image of a dog looks like, the characteristics that make up a dog. And then as a result of that, we would then train it on a specific type of a dog, say a Chihuahua. And what is the characteristics of a Chihuahua versus a generic sort of dogs? And then as a result of that, we build up a new model, a specialized model on top of our particular kinds of images that we're classifying it with. And then we would feed it new images, images that are captured in the wild using our application, whatever the case may be, and see how well our model is capable of detecting what we have within inside of that. So in this case, we would then feed it in a bunch of pictures of other Chihuahuas and muffins, and see which one it detects as an actual as the dog, and which one does it detect as a muffin. And then in the case where it gets it incorrect, we would then adjust the training data so that it is more capable of correctly detecting the dog within inside of the images that we provided. Now, this is kind of the way things like your face detection in your phone and stuff like that works, is that they understand the constructs of a human face, and it will be able to detect a human face, but then you train it specifically on your face, so it knows you versus your partner versus your kids versus the random person walking down the street behind you trying to unlock your phone. And this brings us into generative AI. So generative AI is it's the thing that has really reshaped the way that we converse about AI as an industry today. And I think that there's kind of one graph that really illustrates why that's the case. And it's the indication of adoption through the speed of it attracting users. So with ChatGPT, it reached 100 million users within the first 2 months of its launch. And we can see other, what I would very much consider disruptive technologies in our industry. Things like the internet. There's no denying how the internet has changed the way we work with computers and the way that we think about computing. And it took 7 years to reach that same level of prevalency globally. Like seven years, and like I said, how impactful that has been. But then ChatGPT did that within 2 months, and the amount of awareness that it has inside of the general populace is pretty unbelievable for me. I've been around tech for a couple of decades now, and seeing how aware non-technical people are of this big shift in technology is pretty impactful. You go and ask any non-technical friend or family member, and there's a good chance that they've heard of, if not used, ChatGPT or something of that ilk. So when we're talking about generative AI, naturally we have to talk about ChatGPT, because it's the thing that's really popularized this term in the market of generative AI. Now, it's also important to note that ChatGPT isn't AI. ChatGPT is an application built on top of AI from a generative AI platform from OpenAI. ChatGPT it's just the interface to it. Because at the end of the day, the model, in this case, a GPT model or a generative pre-trained transformer model, which is what OpenAI has produced, it's sitting there. It's full of information. It's got connections between that information. It understands how to draw conclusions from requests that's provided to then give you responses or completions, as we call them in generative AI terminology. Like, it knows how to do all that, but it's sitting there doing nothing until you prompt it, until you give it a request. And that's what ChatGPT does. It gives you that interface to it. So under the hood, it's just as an application, it's just a way to converse with this model, and it does it in a much more natural style than, like I said, I've got Google Homes around the house, and if you try to ask them questions, you've got to make sure that you're triggering them with the right set of keywords to detect what you're trying to do, to figure out the intent. Whereas ChatGPT and these GPT models that it uses are more capable of figuring out what you want based off of that. But at the end of the day, ChatGPT is a very generalized model. It doesn't do, well, it can do a lot of different things. Like, you could get it to summarize a movie in the form of a Shakespeare sonnet. You could get it to generate you a workout routine based off of your current level of fitness and the availability of a gym that you can get to. You can get it to write code for you. There's kind of no ends to what you can get it to generate. But that's because it's a generalist. It can do pretty much anything. But that puts the onus on you a lot to make sure that you're coaxing it to give you the kinds of things you're actually outputting, which are actually wanting as an output. And then that brings us on to the idea of specialized models. And I'd be remiss to not talk about GitHub Copilot, because it's one that is very well understood by and probably a lot of people that have been watching, whether it's been GitHub Universe last week, Ignite, if you've got any of those other sessions, you've probably seen GitHub Copilot presented at .NET Conf over the last couple of days as well. But GitHub Copilot is an approach to a specialized model. So it's specialized around just generating code completions or completions that are centered around coding problems that you're trying to solve. And what's interesting about GitHub Copilot is it's using the exact same models as ChatGPT. It uses a GPT-4 model, which you can use with ChatGPT. I think ChatGPT is 3.5, GPT 3.5 by default. But if you're on the paid subscription, you can use GPT-4. And there was some announcements a couple of weeks ago about some changes to those models and things like that from OpenAI themselves. But because it's using the exact same thing that we get out of ChatGPT, the question is, well, why would I use one versus the other? Like, if ChatGPT can do exactly the same thing as GitHub Copilot, what's the difference? Well, the specialization is where it comes in. It's not that GitHub Copilot has been trained on additional data, but it's a lot more contextually aware. If you ask it a question of, I need a particular type generated, well, how does it know what type to generate? Well, it looks at the code base that you're working with. It sees that you're in a C# project, so it's going to generate you a C# type rather than a TypeScript type definition, because it's just going because TypeScript maybe is the one that it would think is the most likely thing or the most common response that it could give you. It understands context. It understands the cursor position in a file, the open tabs that you've got, the types that are loaded via references within inside of the code base, so that it can give you a more accurate response that's around the particular code that you're working with. Now, you can do this with any other large language model, but the thing is, you then have to provide all that context to it. And that's really where specialization over the top of GPT models or these large language models really comes down to how much information you can add to the request or the prompt that's coming up from the end user. And that brings us to the question of, well, what's the role that Microsoft plays within all of this? And particularly, like, what's Azure's standpoint? Because I'm in the .NET on Azure advocacy team, so other than, like, I think it's kind of cool. Like, what's Azure's relationship with this? Well, at Microsoft, we've produced a .NET SDK for working with OpenAI or Azure OpenAI, if you would prefer. And in that case, so we have produced an Azure OpenAI service that goes along with that can be comparable to OpenAI itself. The main difference is, well, that we're in partnership with OpenAI. We're not trying to produce our own models. We actually provide the same GPT models that OpenAI produces. They provide them to us, and we then have them as availabilities within inside of Azure. Because OpenAI just wants to make sure that artificial intelligence platforms are available to as many people, and to, like, they just want to benefit people by having these AI platforms. And at Microsoft, that kind of fits very well with our mission statement of empowering every person on the planet. So it's a very nice synergy relationship we've got there. So, like I said, we can take these pre-trained models from OpenAI, and then with Azure OpenAI service, we can add extensions on top of those based off of your own data. You bring in your own organizational information, whether it's data from a SQL database, from files that you've got with inside of document storage, and you add those, but they're only for your instance of the server. We're not using them to retrain GPT models or anything like that. They are just additional bits of information that you can query with inside of your application when you perform requests and get responses back, and you can then contextualize around your organization's information, so that you can get hopefully more accurate responses that are relevant for you in a business, rather than it just going to generate out something completely random. Obviously, Ignite is also on at the same time as what we're doing today, and we had a heap of additional announcements around the AI services that we've got, Azure AI, and a whole bunch of stuff like that, which is well beyond the scope of what I wanted to cover off today. But I do recommend checking out some of those sessions if you want to learn a bit more deep dives into things like how do you bring your own data into an AI system that you're building, stuff like that. Oops, wrong button. Okay, so let's jump back to our demo and have a look again at how that application that we had just there before, like, how did it actually work? So we'll come back into VS Code and let's build an application from scratch. I've got about, I think, 12 minutes. Do you reckon we can build an application live from scratch? I reckon we can give it a try. So let's do .NET. It's going to help if I actually can spell things. So we'll do .NET new, and we'll create one called .NET Conf Demo. Go to .NET Conf Demo, and we'll copy. I'm just going to copy across the app settings from previous, because I don't want to accidentally publish my API keys or anything like that for OpenAI on a recorded stream, because then I have to go through and cycle them and then find all the applications I'm using them in. Okay. So copy across our app settings. That's all done. Then we'll do .NET add. We're going to add some reference. We're going to add reference to a shared project, which has just got some shared types. Add package. Oops. Add. No. .NET add package. So we're going to use the hosting extensions just to run this application, and then NuGet install packages, all the things, .net add package, and we'll add the Azure.ai.OpenAI NuGet package. So this is the it's still in preview, the OpenAI package, unless it got like GA'd today and I haven't seen that announcement. I've installed the preview version, so hopefully that's the most up-to-date version that we've got there. All right, and then we will find our application in here. So here we go. Here's our .NET Conf application. Excellent. And let's just delete all of that. And we're going to need to do a few things. Like we're going to scaffold out, obviously loading, starting our application host. We're going to need to connect to OpenAI, Azure OpenAI service, and then we'll start building out some prompts. All right, so we're going to start with AI host builder. And let's see if IntelliSense wants to fire up. I don't know if it wants to just yet. And I do actually have GitHub Copilot running as well, so it may jump in and try and complete things for me. But unfortunately, it looks like I'm actually going to have to type things out myself. Or things are really going to freak out, and I'm going to realize that I'm running out of time. And we will actually just start by copy and pasting some code, because this is not like, this boilerplate code is not that interesting. All we're doing is we're using the host builder. We're going to just start that up. We're then going to configure that with our app settings file and using the just environment variable for developer versus non-developer settings. And then we're going to configure some services. So the first service is, well, we're going to load up our configuration file so that we can pass that in through dependency injection. And then I'm going to create an instance of the OpenAI client. Now, here I'm using just an E number to determine whether I'm working with Azure OpenAI or OpenAI. And that's because this .NET SDK that we've produced for OpenAI works whether you're using Azure OpenAI service or OpenAI directly, so you can use that interchangeably with inside of your application. It can flick back and forth between the two. So that's all set up, and then we will create a new class. Okay, looks like IntelliSense hasn't properly loaded, so let's just restart Visual Studio Code. And we're going to have to create our host builder in a moment. There we go. All right, now let's see if everything is going to activate. This is the fun thing of like doing a talk like the day after a release of a new RTM of .NET, is that I'm not quite sure whether the stuff I'm running is the preview builds or the production ready builds. I think I might actually still have some of the preview stuff running on my machine. Order of execution problems. So let's see. Is GPT? No. All right. I think my attempt to do a live coding demo is going to fall flat on its face. So instead, let's just have a look at one that I prepared earlier and talk a bit about how that works. Just zoom that out a touch so we can see a bit more on screen. Okay, so here's that file that we loaded up, opened up before, and I've got this console GPT service. So this is the hosted service that's going to run when our application starts up. We've got a application hosting lifetime. So this is something that is going to control the start and stop of the application, and then like nice cleanups if we were worrying about disposing of objects. We don't have anything that we need to dispose of, so that's not particularly impactful. We've got our OpenAI client that's coming in. So our application itself is not aware of, are we working with Azure OpenAI service or OpenAI directly? And we're just going to capture that along with the settings as some variables. Ooh, I could turn that into a primary constructor. Let's do that. So it makes me feel like I'm actually writing a bit of code. There we go. I've sort of written some code. We refactored some code there. All right. Now, what's really happening, like the guts of what's happening is inside of this start async method here. So we're getting back our settings, which is just going to have information in there for when we call out to our completions endpoint to get responses back from our large language model. We're going to create some chat completion options. So there's a couple of different ways you can work with generative AI. Chat completions is the kind of thing that most people are familiar with. It's what you do when you're working with ChatGPT is you're having a chat and you're getting completions back from that. And we can control a bunch of stuff in the way this works. The maximum number of tokens, so how many things are we sending across as the request to our large language model. We can restrict that so that we don't write War and Peace and send that across, and then it results in a massive amount of slowdown as it tries to generate a response. Or we can just leave it to the default maximum amount that the model will support. Temperature. Temperature is used to control the, well, if we hover over and get the type information, it's used to control the creativity of what the model is going to generate back. Now, it does support a value of kind of 0 to 2, but anything kind of above a 1 in terms of temperature is going to get some pretty creative responses. The things that you're going to see out of that are, they might look like words, but they're not necessarily words, and they're not necessarily constructed sentences or anything like that. A good rule of thumb is you want to sit somewhere just below 1. I tend to do about a 0.7 temperature when working with it. And then we've got some other things around penalties and stuff like that. But the most important thing that we can provide in our completion options is messages. So the messages are the prompts, or the things that we're sending across to our request to generate a completion. And there's 3 primary categories of messages or roles that the message can fall into. We have the system role, we have the user role, and the assistant role. The system role is how we set up the, for lack of a better description, the personality of the conversational experience that we're building. So in this case, I have a system prompt here that says, you are a friendly assistant named .NET Bot. You prefer Australian English as your language, and you're an expert in the .NET runtime. You're an expert in the .NET runtime and the C# and F# programming languages. Response using Australian colloquialisms and slang. That's why we saw things like "g'day mate" and stuff like that in the response that we got before, because we gave it some personality. So we're setting up this just initial set of options, write out the starting message, and then we are going to read from the user. So that's where I typed in the message. If it was nothing, continue. If we said goodbye, we're going to abort and we're going to quit out. Otherwise, we're going to add the prompt that someone put in as a user rolled message. So this indicates to our model that this is something that you need to try and answer from. So this is something that the user is requesting a response to. And then we're going to call out to get chat completions async. We'll provide it with the model that we're using. So I could be using GPT 3.5, 3.5 Turbo, GPT 4, et cetera, et cetera. The options and a cancellation token, because this is an async execution. We're then just going to check to make sure that we got some choices back. So did the completion did we actually get a generated completion? If it doesn't have any completion, it's just going to, I don't know what to do. Otherwise, we're going to iterate through the responses and write them back out. So let's fire this back up again, and we'll come into our sample application, and we'll do .NET run. Let's just full screen this up again. We'll see kind of what this, this kind of personality that we've put in there. Like, how does that, how does that really influence the way that we can ask it? I think so. We'll zoom that back in, and we'll say, should the word color have a U in it? So let's see. Yes, as in Aussie English, it should have a U in color, favor, humor. But if you, yeah, so that, you can see how we've given it kind of this, like I said, personality to it. We've given it context into what it's capable of doing. All right, but we've also said that it's an expert in .NET. So let's say generate a person type with a first and last name. So let's see what it's going to do with that. I haven't told it to generate C# or F#, but as you can see that it's done that because we gave the context to this chatbot, or this experience, that its personality is, it understands C# and F#, so it's naturally going to give back those as a response. Now let's say I want C# only from now on. So we'll give it another prompt and say, create me a list of 5 people. All right, so because we said I only want C# from now on, it understands that. We've added that as a message in there, and we're keeping a history of messages that we've previously asked. So it's not generating F# anymore because we said don't generate F#. It also knows to generate the person using the type signature that we have up here. Oop, there it is, because that's still in our history. Those have been pushed in as assistant messages that we can keep track of and we can work with. So that's, and then we can obviously keep asking more questions like how do I filter, and so on and so forth. And it would keep responding back, and it understands this history, and it's going to keep using that information in there. But we're nearly at the end of the demo for today. So just to wrap up, when we talk about AI, there's a lot of different things that it can mean when we're building AI-based systems. But right now, generative AI is the thing that a lot of people are looking at. How do we use these large language models to have an experience where we're generating answers based off of information we can give it? Context is key to get more accurate information back. At Microsoft, we have Azure OpenAI service, which has the GPT models from OpenAI that you can work with. You can layer with your own data to give your business context to it, but it's not actually training those models on that data. So you're not having to worry about your business aspects or business secrets getting leaked out anyway. If you want to play around with that sample application that I just had there, and there's a couple other samples inside of that of using other parts of the OpenAI SDK, you'll find that at github.com/aaronpowell/consolegpt. And to get started with generative AI, it's really just a single HTTP call away. Like that's what these are, just REST API calls. You don't have to become like an expert in how models are built or anything like that. I just want to do a shout out. Next week, we're kicking off a hackathon called the Great .NET 8 Hack. You can find that at aka.ms/hacktogether/.net. And we're going to have some prizes for AI-based solutions as well as cloud-native solutions and things like that. But that's just about me done for now. I'm going to hand it back to today's host. But if you want to learn more, please do reach out to me. I'm also writing a series of articles around generative AI for the .NET developer on my website at aaron-powell.com. But that's all there is for me. Back to our host.